Selamat siang Pak Indra.
Halo, selamat siang.
Ya, kita nunggu ya Pak ya.
Siap. Suara saya jelas kan?
Jelas Pak, bagus.
Oke, siap.
Selamat sore Pak Indra.
Halo, selamat sore Pak Henry. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
Selamat sore Pak Henry, Pak Indra.
Selamat sore, Bu Rahmat, Tina.
Mana kabarnya Pak? Sehat-sehat?
Alhamdulillah sehat.
Selamat sore Ibu.
Selamat sore Pak Henry. Pak Henry, posisinya, lokasinya di mana Pak sekarang? Di Filipina?
I'm sorry Ibu, I still don't speak. Yes, I'm from the Philippines.
Oh, okay. And you are in Manila now?
No, I'm in Jakarta. I
Oh,
arrived in February.
Oh, okay, that's great. It's good to see you, Pak Henry.
Good to see you also, Ibu. Have you ever been to Manila, Ibu?
Not yet.
Soon,
Maybe someday.
Great. Bu Rahmatina, mungkin nanti apakah kami perlu paparan gitu?
Nggak harus sih Pak. Kalau ada boleh, tapi kalau misalkan tanggapannya secara verbal boleh juga Pak.
Ya, boleh. Kalau gitu minta tolong bisa dijadikan co-host.
Host ya. Oke.
Ya, terima kasih.
Ya. Sampai.
Selamat sore Pak Teguh,
Ya,
Pak
selamat
Dekan.
sore. Good afternoon.
Apa kabar?
Pak Herima. Di sini ada Mas Haji,
Selamat sore Pak Teguh.
Mas Jayadi. Selamat sore.
Selamat sore Pak Teguh, Ibu Rahma, Pak Indra.
Pak Haji.
Selamat sore Pak Haji, Pak Teguh.
Pak Cahyadi.
Sore Pak Revindo.
Sore Pak.
Sore Pak Revindo.
Sore Pak Dekan,
Pak Revindo.
Pak Henry, Pak Priasto, Pak Cahyadi.
Sore Pak Revindo.
Siap. Sore Pak.
Sore Pak Said.
Sore Pak Said.
You're still on mute, Pak.
Selamat sore Pak Said.
Selamat sore. Halo Pak Teguh, apa kabar Pak?
Sore.
Halo. Ya terus ada Pak Indra, ada Ibu Rahmatina.
Selamat sore Pak Said.
Selamat sore. Pak ganti dulu ke. Halo Pak Revindo.
Siap Pak.
Tadi saya mau coba ganti ke
Virtual background ya.
virtual background.
Okay. Shall we start in 30 seconds, I suppose?
Yeah.
Right. Distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all and a very warm welcome to the 5th Indonesia Development Talk webinar to discuss Indonesia's Economic Outlook 2022 and 2023. This webinar is co-organized by the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, and the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. My name is Cahyadi Indrananto. I am the Senior Communications Officer for ADB in Indonesia. It is my pleasure to be the MC today, and it is good to see many of you participating so far. We will start today by having welcoming and opening remarks, followed by the main presentation. After that, we will go into the panel session that will be followed by a discussion in which you will have the opportunity to comment and ask questions. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the first speaker today, Bapak Said Zaidansyah, ADB Deputy Country Director for Indonesia, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Pak Said, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Pak Chai. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Pak Teguh Dartanto, Dean Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Indonesia, the management of the faculty, distinguished speakers, Pak Indra Darmawan, Ibu Zahra Murad, Pak Diana Findo, as well as the moderator, Ibu Rahmatina Kasri, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat siang and welcome and very good afternoon to you all. I would like to welcome all of you today to our Indonesia Development Talk webinar. This is the 5th webinar under the series where practitioners and thought leaders discuss innovative approaches and solutions to development challenges in Indonesia. The Asian Development Bank is very pleased to be able to organize this particular talk jointly with the Faculty of Economics and Business of Universitas Indonesia. Our webinar today will revolve around ADB's flagship publication, the Asian Development Outlook 2020, or ADO, that was just launched last week. The report analyzes economic and development issues in developing countries in Asia. It also provides projections of growth and inflation in the region and countries. Today, we will focus our discussions on our analysis on Indonesia. However, before we go there, I would like to highlight a few takeaways from the report to give context to the discussion. First of all, it's about the continuing uncertainties. For the last few years, any attempt to produce economic projections of a particular country, including Indonesia, have been particularly challenging due to various global uncertainties. This year, as you can imagine, is no exception. In addition to the possibility of yet another COVID-19 variant, we have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is rattling the global financial and commodity markets and massively heighten the economic uncertainty. Secondly, in many parts of developing Asia, milder health impacts and vaccination progress have allowed economies to become more open than previously. Against this backdrop, developing Asia's growth rebounded to 6.9% last year, supported by strong export growth. However, the pace of recovery remains uneven across the economy of the region, and it is still largely incomplete. Third, we project GDP in the region will expand by 5.2% this year and 5.3% in the next, on continued recovery in domestic demand and solid export performance. Inflation will rise to 3.7% this year and moderate to 3.1% in 2023. Price pressures are increasing and monetary authorities should remain vigilant. Fourth, there are significant downside risk from a prolonged Russian invasion of Ukraine that will impact on prices of global commodity, to tightening global financial conditions and continued risk from the pandemic, including the current outbreaks in the People's Republic of China and the possibility of more deadly COVID-19 variants. I hope this webinar can discuss these four issues that I've just raised in greater details and how they may impact Indonesia's economic prospects. For now, I would like to thank all the distinguished panelists, Bapak Indra Darmawan from the Ministry of Environment, Ibu Zahra Murad from the Small and Medium Enterprises Center in the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia, and Bapak Dian Revindo from Indonesia's Economic and Social Research Institute. Thank you for sparing your time to share your insights on the topic. I'd also like to thank Ibu Rahmati Nakasri as the moderator and all the organizing committee members. I wish us all a very rich, productive discussions. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pak Said, for welcoming us and also to provide the context to our discussion today. To open this webinar, allow me to invite the next speaker, Dr. Teguh Dartanto, Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Pak Teguh, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Peaceful greeting to us all. Your Excellency, Mr. Said Zaidansyah, Deputy Country Director for Indonesia and the ADB, our distinguished speaker, Your Excellencies, Mr. Henry Ma, Country Economist for Indonesia and the ADB, Mr. Priyasto Aji, Economist at the ADB, Bapak Dr. Indra Darmawan, Senior Economic Advisor for the Ministry of Investment and Coordinating Board of Investment, Ibu Zahra Kamala Nindita Murad, PhD, Head of the UKM Center at FEBUI, Dr. Muhammad Dian Revindo, the Head of Business Climate and Global Value Chain Research Group at the LPEM FEBUI, and our moderator, Ibu Rahmatina Aulia Kasri, PhD, Head of the Center for Islamic Economic and Business at FEBUI, Senior Research College from the University of Indonesia, the ADB, and the other distinguished institution, student, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon to all distinguished speakers and participants. I hope we are all blessed with health, optimism, and hope as we start today's webinar discussion. I'm very honored to welcome you all to today's Indonesia Development Talk webinar on Indonesia Economic Outlook 2022 and 2023. This webinar came to fruition through the strong collaborations between the Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Indonesia and the ADB. Today's talk is the fifth webinar we have held as a part of this series. The aims of this webinar series is to bring together experts and scientists from Indonesia and the ADB to work together in order to discover innovative solutions to the challenges Indonesia is currently facing, especially due to the pandemic. This webinar is particularly seeks to discuss key results presented within the recently launched ASEAN Development Outlook report. Distinguished speaker, colleagues, and participants, building on the key findings within this report, although the COVID-19 has brought many deep challenges to our economy, this recently published 2022 ADB ASEAN Development Outlook report provides message of hope and recovery. For Indonesia, the report highlights our full economic recovery in 2021, despite a temporary slowdown due to the pandemic. Investment picked up in Indonesia, exports started to increase, inflation was found relatively low and stable, and the budget deficit was lower than anticipated. The report also importantly predicts strong growth within our economy if these positive trends continue. Despite the positive message, we still face the real challenges. The report flags two possible main sources of the adverse effect to our economy. The first is the continuous health threat the pandemic still brings, and the second are external threats, in particular the situation in Ukraine and Russia. The hope is that through the today dialogues we will have today, we will able to pinpoint how the global and the local challenges we are facing might impact our economy. Importantly, we also hope that the solution to these challenges might be discussed. I know officially open this webinar and hope that our discussion will benefit our nation recovery and further cement collaborative work between our faculty, FABU, and the ADB. Even though we can not only meet virtually, I'm deeply impressed by the strength of the collaboration and cooperation between our distinguished institutions, which have brought us all here today. Let us continue to work together through the strong collaboration for Indonesia's sustainable development and recovery from the pandemic. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be with us all. Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much, Pak Teguh, and thank you also for summarizing some key items from the Outlook. Now we come to the second part of the webinar, and for that I would like to invite our moderator today. She is Dr. Rahmatina Awaliyah Kasri. Ibu Rahma is the chairwoman of the Center of Sharia Economics and Business, Universitas Indonesia. Ibu Rahma, over to you, please.
Terima kasih Pak Cahyadi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang untuk kita semuanya. Ya, senang sekali saya pada siang hari menjelang sore yang berbahagia ini bisa menjadi moderator dalam acara Indonesia Development Talk yang akan mengangkat topik Indonesia's Economic Outlook 2022-2023. Indonesia saat ini sedang mengalami tantangan yang luar biasa. Pandemi COVID-19 yang dimulai sejak awal tahun 2020 telah memberikan dampak yang besar, tidak hanya untuk kesehatan masyarakat, namun juga perekonomian nasional. Ekonomi mengalami kontraksi, angka kemiskinan meningkat, dan harga-harga mengalami kenaikan. Hal serupa terjadi di banyak negara, terutama di kawasan Asia. Namun demikian, kita tahu bahwa dunia tidak tinggal diam. Di Indonesia, pemerintah telah melakukan berbagai kebijakan. Masyarakat, termasuk masyarakat dan institusi global, termasuk ADB, bergotong royong untuk membantu memulihkan kondisi yang tidak diharapkan ini. Semua dilakukan untuk bisa bangkit bersama dari krisis ini. Oleh karena itu, sangat relevan untuk kita mengangkat topik Indonesia's Economic Outlook 2022-2023 dan melihat bagaimana pemulihan dan kondisi ekonomi Indonesia ke depan dengan mempertimbangkan kondisi pada saat ini serta berbagai peluang dan tantangan yang ada baik dari faktor domestik maupun faktor global yang tadi sudah disebutkan oleh Bapak Said Zaidansyah selaku Deputy Country Director untuk Indonesia Asia Development Bank. Nah, Ibu Bapak sekalian, hadirin yang berbahagia, alhamdulillah saat ini telah hadir bersama kita 2 orang narasumber dan juga 3 orang panelis yang luar biasa. Dan saya akan sapa dulu satu persatu. Selamat siang, Pak Henry. Pak Henry bisa mendengarkan saya. Selamat siang, Pak Henry. Oke, baik. Semoga sehat-sehat selalu, Pak Henry. Selanjutnya saya
Selamat sore.
Selamat sore. Betul, Pak, sudah bilang sore. Terima kasih atas kehadirannya. Selanjutnya saya ingin menyapa Bapak Priyasto Aji, ekonomis ADB.
Selamat siang, Ibu.
Selamat siang, Pak Priyasto Aji. Kemudian saya juga ingin menyapa para panelis, Bapak Indra Darmawan, PhD. Selamat siang, Pak Indra.
Selamat sore Ibu Rahma.
Ya, selamat sore, Pak Indra. Terima kasih sudah bergabung. Selanjutnya Bapak Muhammad Dian Revindo, PhD. Selamat sore, Pak Revindo.
Selamat sore Bu, siap menunggu arahan.
Oke, siap, Pak Vindo. Dan terakhir ini panelis kita yang paling cantik, Ibu Zahra Kemala, PhD. Selamat sore.
Selamat sore, Bu Rahma.
Oke, terima kasih Bu Zahra. Baiklah, saya pikir kita semua sudah tidak sabar untuk mendengarkan paparan dari narasumber. Oleh karena itu, saya akan segera membacakan CV dan mempersilahkan masing-masing narasumber untuk menyampaikan paparannya. Saya akan mulai dari Bapak Henry Ma. Henry Ma adalah Senior Country Economist ADB untuk Indonesia. Sebelum bergabung dengan ADB, dia adalah staf pengajar di Universitas New York dan Universitas New York City, mengajar mata kuliah pembangunan ekonomi, makroekonomi, ekonomi internasional, dan juga ekonometrika. Beliau juga seorang ekonom senior di International Monetary Fund yang telah bekerja di berbagai negara, dari Vietnam, Kolombia, Afghanistan, dan pernah menjabat sebagai perwakilan tetap IMF di Honduras. Beliau memegang gelar dari University of Philippines, University of Cambridge, dan University of Pennsylvania. Terima kasih Pak Henry sudah bergabung bersama kami. Dan selanjutnya saya juga mengundang Bapak Priyasto Aji. Beliau adalah ekonom di Indonesia Resident Mission Asian Development Bank. Sebelum bergabung dengan ADB, beliau adalah ekonom di Sekretariat Asean dan juga ekonom senior di Superintending Company of Indonesia. Beliau meraih gelar sarjana dari Universitas Pajajaran, Universitas Stretchdale, Inggris, dan Universitas Siena, Italia. Terima kasih Pak Priyasto Aji sudah bergabung. Dan saya mungkin langsung persilahkan Pak Henry dan juga Pak Aji untuk sekitar 15 menit ke depan menyampaikan Indonesia Economic Outlook 2022-2023. Silahkan Pak.
Terima kasih Ibu Dr. Rahmatina. Selamat soreng to everyone present in the University of Indonesia. Thank you so much, Dean Tego Dartanto, for the invitation to do the IDT jointly with the legendary Faculty of Economics at the University of Indonesia. And I am looking forward to the discussions with Dr. Indra Darmawan, with Dr. Zara Murad, and Dr. Muhammad Revindo. I am very honored to be here at the University of Indonesia, even if only virtually. And I am hoping to eventually meet the faculty and the students of the University of Indonesia. The slide, please. So, if I could describe 2021 to 2022 in Indonesia, I would use 6 words. Solid recovery, good prospects, big uncertainty. Let's recap 2021. The economy briskly rebounded. There was a downturn in Q3 because of the mobility restrictions due to an outbreak of COVID-19. As you will see from the graph, this is shown in the downturn in Q3, but the economy quickly bounced back. For the full year, those of you who follow the economy may be aware that exports boomed, but actually the economy's performance was more broad-based than that. As you will see from the second graph, contributions to growth were about equal from consumption, investment, and net exports. Next slide, please. If we look within consumption and investment in particular, pretty much all components of consumption recovered in 2021, and similarly with investment. Next slide, please. And with regard to the external sector performance, commodity prices boomed. Name it: nickel, coal, copper, palm oil. Not surprisingly, therefore, export earnings is strongly recovered. But note that imports also grew quite healthily, and that was because of the recovery of demand in the economy. Next slide, please. The trade surplus therefore led to a current account surplus of about 0.3% of GDP, which is unusual because pre-pandemic, Indonesia had current account deficits of about 2 to 2.5% of GDP. So it was not only in trade and services and incomes that external performance was good. Financial inflows were also quite healthy, especially FDI. Hence, Indonesia ended 2021 with international reserves at a healthy level of more than $140 billion. So for the full year in Indonesia last year, growth was 3.7%. From a contraction of 2% in 2020. This performance is among the leaders in Southeast Asia and in developing Asia. Next slide, please. Some pressures started to arise late in 2021. Inflation was low for the full year, averaging 1.6%, but it started picking up late in the year. And as you will see, if we look at broader indicators like the GDP deflator or the producer price index, there were indications of inflation rising. Some of this is not surprising. As the economy picked up and as commodity prices started rising, we would expect some increase in inflation. As I've already noted, reserves grew in 2021 and the exchange rate was broadly stable. So on the whole, therefore, what do we see in 2021? Domestic demand picking up and therefore contributing to the performance that was already being set by exports. What do we attribute this to? The COVID-19 pandemic waning, confidence recovering, incomes picking up, and jobs improving. Similarly, the recovery in demand stimulated confidence among investors, and there was also a recovery of credit conditions. Next slide, please. Policy also contributed. Fiscal stimulus continued last year through PEN, but because revenue was buoyant and grew faster than we had expected, we had the best of both worlds. There was a fiscal stimulus, but the deficit was much lower than programmed. It had been budgeted to be 5.7%. By October, it had been projected to be 5.1%, and we estimate that it ended up at about 4.6%. For its part, Bank Indonesia also supported growth. The policy rate, the 7-day reverse repo rate, was kept at 3.5% all year. And Bank Indonesia, through the burden sharing arrangement with the MOF, purchased government bonds. Another player is the OJK, the financial regulator. It extended the forbearance, the regulatory forbearance, which allowed banks breathing space with regard to restructured loans. So what was the result of this, not just for the economy, but also for social indicators? Unemployment fell. It peaked at 7.1% in 2020 and fell to 6.5% in 2021. The poverty rate, which rose to 10.2% in 2020, fell to 9.7%. And the Gini inequality coefficient, which had also risen to 0.384 in 2020, slid to 0.381 in 2021. And that is why I use the phrase solid recovery. Next slide, please. "2022 starts with good prospects, as I had noted earlier. The third wave is abating. There was an increase in infections in January, February, but it has rapidly fallen. And the vaccination, the percent of the population that has been vaccinated is steadily increases. What about consumer demand? Consumer confidence up, retail sales up, Bank Mandiri sales index up, and it has continued to be solid in Q1 and the early parts of Q2 despite the COVID-19 outbreak. What about on the production side? Manufacturing activity has been up, purchasing managers index has been up, and this has also been bolstered by the recovery of lending, which picked up around Q3 and has continued throughout Q1. So all in all, the Indonesian economy enters 2022 with good prospects, with domestic demand recovering, confidence and incomes and jobs picking up. But, as I add at the title, but, next slide, please. Uncertainty has increased, big uncertainty this time. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine on February 25, suddenly a lot of things have changed. So we see this most clearly in the spike of the oil price. The APBN, for instance, was projecting $63 oil price for 2022, but as of today, it's about $105, $103 or something like that. Next slide, please. It's not just that. The Fed has started tightening, and there are indications that it may tighten by more than 25 basis points at its next meeting. Risk premiums have started rising, and there are concerns that the US economy may slow. Next slide, please. So the outlook is clouded by great uncertainty. The Russian invasion of Ukraine continues, commodity prices have risen, geopolitical decisions are being made, supply chains are being disrupted. But let's not forget, there could still be potential new outbreaks of COVID-19. There is now XL in Korea and BA2 somewhere else. China, there has been a lockdown in Shanghai and Shenzhen, and again, supply chains are being disrupted. And last month, manufacturing and services actually contracted. Financial volatility could increase as the Fed and as other central banks tighten monetary policy. So as Pa Said has noted, projections have become very complicated because of these shocks that have been happening almost daily. So let's look at just this, for instance. The EU has been considering or may even have already banned imports of coal from Russia. Impact on Indonesia could be good because Indonesia is an exporter, but could be nothing because apparently Indonesia already has the capacity constraints. Could also be nothing because the type of Indonesian coal may be different from what they use in Europe. Let's say it's positive. Let's say Indonesia is able to export much more coal, but then that would raise the prices of coal and could affect the cost of electricity generation in Indonesia. So it's both complicated and cross-cutting. As I've noted, lockdowns in Shanghai and a potential slowdown. A few days ago, concerns have risen that the US yield curve, the difference between the 10-year interest and 2-year interest rates, have inverted, which in the past have signaled a recession for the US. The nickel market prices have gone crazy. Ukraine, sunflower exports curtailed, would affect cooking oil, the supply of cooking oil in Europe. Again, could have positive and negative implications for Indonesia. Russian fertilizer exports blocked. Short term may not have an impact, but later this year or next could have because it would affect farm production. So the key thing is that the situation is quite cloudy, but we can discern some tendencies, some patterns if we pierce through this cloud. Next slide, please. Some things are clear. Energy bills will rise for oil and gas importers. Indonesia is a net oil importer, but not by much. But another thing to note is that it's not just oil. Wheat prices have also risen and other commodity prices have risen. For Indonesia, higher prices of wheat would have an impact in the, for instance, in the consumption of noodles and so on, and in the fact that wheat products account for about 2% of the CPI. So again, it could be mixed. Oil prices could hurt Indonesia, but higher commodity prices in general could benefit Indonesia because it could generate a revenue windfall. Next slide, please. US interest rates could both affect growth in the US and therefore demand for goods and services around the world, but could also have an impact on financial volatility. I should add at this point that the situation seems sanguine for Indonesia. First, its current account is, in contrast to previous years, in balance or even in surplus. Its reserve situation is strong. It's the percent of external debt that is long-term is about 85%, and the percent of government debt that is held by foreigners has fallen from about 39% in 2020 to about 20% in 2021. But this could complicate the conduct of monetary policy, as we will know. Next slide, please. Bottom line, the ADO, the ADB's flagship publication, projects that growth should strengthen in developing Asia this year. Let's look, for example, in particular at Southeast Asia, from 2.9% average growth last year to 4.9% this year and 5.2% this year. And Indonesia is a leader. So for instance, the Philippines is projected to have 6% growth this year, but take note that part of it is because of a base effect, because of a contraction of 9% of GDP, 9% last year. So for Indonesia, after 3.7% growth, we are currently projecting 5% growth this year and 5.2% next year. But inflation, we expect to rise this year because one, demand is picking up, two, the lagged effect of monetary expansion, and three, the commodity price shock. Next slide, please. So on the whole, this is our scenario for Indonesia. The COVID-19 outbreak in Q1 should have minimal impact, but there could be an impact, although limited, of the Russian invasion on Ukraine. For private consumption, we are projecting that after growth last year of 2%, private consumption this year should grow by about 5%, which is the same as the pre-pandemic trend growth. So it's quite conservative, our assumption. We're assuming no revenge spending. People not spending now to make up for the spending they were not able to do in 2020 and 2021. So that's why there could be some upward risk, upside potential to growth. Investment grew by about 5% last year, could pick up by 6% this year. Why? Demand is recovering, confidence is improving, credit has recovered, and reforms to the operating and investment environment could promote investment. Inflation, however, we're projecting to rise to be 3.6% this year. In contrast, we had been projecting 2.8% inflation in the December ADO, and this will be largely due to the commodity price shock. So this will lead to an impact not just on the welfare of individuals and households, but also on the fiscal balance, because this could lead to pressure for support for users of electricity and energy and basic commodities. We're also expecting that monetary policy will be less supportive this year. One, the economy is picking up. Two, inflation is picking up. Already, Bank Indonesia has announced an increase in reserve requirements and has announced that it will re-examine monetary policy after the first half. Trade, which had been a star performer last year, we expect will moderate this year. So trade volume growth should slow, but not turn negative. Again, there could be it could go both ways. If the disruption because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine leads to disrupted supply chains and also reduced confidence and incomes and demand in the major trading partners, then trade volume growth could further slow. On the other hand, let's look at services, for instance. Our assumptions are based on a conservative projection that tourism earnings will be about the same this year as last year. If the flights to Bali resume strongly and tourism recovers, then there could be upside potential. So on the whole, we're projecting 5% growth for this year with some upside risk because of domestic demand and some downside risk because of the global uncertainty. inflation higher, 3.6%, and a current account of an approximate balance of 0. So some fall in volume growth of exports, but big increases in commodity price, in the prices of the main exports. For next year, we expect that as the Ukraine price shock abates, inflation should also abate to the pre-pandemic trend of 3%. And as activity further normalizes, growth should pick up to about 5.2%. Next slide, please. Which will now be the turn of Paaji, so that I've discussed the short-term, near-term outlook, but for the medium and long-term, the challenge will be technology transformation in order to foster productivity and growth. Over to you, Paaji.
Silakan Pak Aji untuk 5-7 menit ke depan, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Henry. Thank you, Ibu. So, this section of the outlook talks about one of the main medium to long-term challenges for Indonesia, that is to pursue technological transformation for productivity and growth. So these are key takeaway or messages of why Indonesia should pursue it, what are the challenges, and what are the key policy options. Indonesia needs much higher growth than the average 5% it achieved from 2015 to 2019 to become high economy by 2045 and escape the middle income trap. So a joint study in 2020 by ADB and Ministry of Finance estimates that adopting Industry 4.0 new technologies could increase per capita GDP to the high income level of around 14,000 by 2045. So why is this? Digital transformation in particular can boost productivity. New technologies provide opportunities for improving growth and social development. There are many examples of this, electric motorcycles and microgeneration would raise GDP, as well as improve air quality, financial technology such as peer-to-peer lending and payments and equity crowdfunding would improve access to finance for micro, small, and medium enterprises. Online platforms would improve the market access of sellers and their profitability. However, there are many challenges to pursue technology transformation, specifically based on the result of our survey. To successfully exploiting Industry 4.0 requires firms tackle challenges of high financial cost of adoption, lack of skilled workers, technical uncertainty, resistance to change, and also digital infrastructure gaps. And then several policy actions have been identified to unlock Indonesia's transformation and economic development. First, together, the government and the private sector and academia need to build advanced innovation infrastructure and also institutions. Firms need to raise their awareness of business value of new technologies, but they also need help in assessing energy transfer and technical support, low-cost plug-and-play solutions, and tech-savvy workforce. Next slide, please. So MOF and ADB conducted a survey to delve deep into Industry 4.0 in Indonesia to collect evidence on the current state of Industry 4.0 technology across manufacturing firms. So the survey centered on around 500 firms in 5 manufacturing industries: food and beverages, automobiles, textiles, clothing, electronics, and footwear, which together provide around 51% of all Indonesian manufacturing value added and about 58% of manufacturing employment. So consulted firms foresaw a number of benefits of technology adoption. Firstly, of course, enhanced productivity and energy efficiency, and then also options to create new products and services, innovative manufacturing processes, and also methods to interact with and deliver products to customer. However, only a relatively small number of firms, around 6%, have aggressively adopted advanced technology and use emerging digitally enabled tools. Nearly 2/3 of firms surveyed, or around 64%, have adopted little technology and still perform many tasks with such basic tools such as spreadsheets and email. So why is this? Why is this? It turns out that it's not easy to exploit Industry 4.0 opportunities, because it requires Indonesian industrialists to overcome high monetary costs, lack of skilled workers, technical uncertainty, cultural resistance to change, and digital infrastructure gaps. Next section, please. So we have 5 pillars for policy actions that have been identified to unlock Indonesia's technological transformation and economic development. These pillars represent areas where, considering Indonesia's particular context, policy action is critical to drive transformation. The first pillar is advanced innovation and infrastructure institution. Second pillar, awareness of the business value of technologies, and so on. Yeah, we have 5 pillars here. So for the first pillars, yeah, advanced innovation, infrastructure, and institutions. So although the government has launched initiatives to strengthen the national innovation system through fiscal incentives, large investment in infrastructure, new funding mechanism for public research, Indonesia's innovation system is still in early stages. For instance, public and private research development and scientific output are comparatively low than ASEAN countries. And then the digital infrastructure gaps persist, especially outside Java. Also, private sector are restricted by regulatory barriers. So it will be critical to address gaps in both hard and soft infrastructure to develop national digital infrastructure and long-term research and development investment plans. Second is awareness of the business value of new technologies. So based on our surveys, it turns out that company managers in Indonesia are often not fully aware of the potentially high returns from new technologies. So ways to increase their awareness, including, such as developing industrial networks and business associations to promote linkages and knowledge exchange between firms in Indonesia and abroad, for instance, creating cross-sector technology forums among universities, research centers, technology vendors are needed. Third pillar is technology transfer and technical support for firms, because we find out that Indonesian firms are at different stages in their technology transformation. So customized support mechanism will be needed for a small group of leading firms. Yeah, this will entail emphasizing support for building capacity to invent and generate new technology. For intermediate followers, this will require emphasizing support that further develops absorptive capacity and ability to innovate. For the largest group, largest group of Indonesian firms are SMEs, firms that have adopted only basic technology. This means emphasizing support to improve basic management and technology practices. The next pillar, low cost and plug and play technology solutions for Indonesian firms. So many new technology are becoming cheaper and easy to use and more widely accessible. Yet, many Indonesian firms report that adopting new technology remains financially out of reach. So for SMEs, for instance, unsuccessful investment in technology could determine financial performance. So the goal here, therefore, is to facilitate access to technologies that meet the needs of these businesses and are affordable and easy to use. This can be done, for instance, by identifying technology solutions that address common issues faced by Indonesian firms, and then developing catalog of affordable plug-and-play technology, and etc. There are many samples. And then the last pillar is tech-savvy workforce. So many firms are reporting this problem. So a lack of tech-savvy workers is also preventing Indonesia from taking advantage of new technology opportunities. Solutions include investing in upgrading training centers to expand courses and modules in new technologies, broadening workers' access to advanced technical training, and etc. So, thank you. Back to you, Henry.
Oke, baik. Terima kasih banyak Pak Henry dan juga Pak Aji atas insight-nya yang luar biasa. Tadi saya mencatat beberapa kata kunci: solid recovery, good prospect, tapi big uncertainties. Kemudian juga ada banyak tantangan untuk technological transformation, untuk productivity dan juga growth, tapi ada 5 pilar policy actions yang bisa dilakukan ke depan. Dan juga proyeksi bahwa Indonesia akan mengalami pertumbuhan ekonomi 5% di tahun 2022 dan 5,2% di tahun 2023. Walaupun juga ada bayang-bayang inflasi sebesar 3,6% ke depan. Baik Ibu Bapak dan hadirin sekalian, selanjutnya tentu diskusi ini belum lengkap kalau kita belum mendengarkan tanggapan dari panelis yang merupakan para pakar di bidangnya. Dan nanti saya juga mengundang para peserta webinar ini untuk mengajukan pertanyaan melalui kolom chat yang tersedia di Zoom masing-masing. Nah, saya akan segera mengundang tanggapan dari para panelis kita. Yang pertama adalah Bapak Indra Darmawan. Pak Indra?
Yes, Bu.
Oke. Beliau saat ini merupakan staf ahli Menteri Kementerian Investasi dan BKPM dan sudah bertugas semenjak tahun 2008 di BKPM. Sebelum itu beliau pernah bertugas di Bappenas di bidang perencanaan sektor daerah, sumber daya alam dan lingkungan hidup. Jadi ini sudah banyak sekali ini yang dilakukan oleh Pak Darmawan. Pak Indra, beliau menempuh pendidikan di London School of Economics dan Political Science, Flinders University, Doctor of Philosophy di bidang Community dan Regional Planning. Kemudian juga Executive Education di Harvard University. Pak Indra, kami persilahkan untuk menyampaikan tanggapannya untuk sekitar 5 sampai 10 menit ke depan. Silakan, Pak.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Rahma. Can I just share some screen, Bu?
Bisa, Pak.
Yeah.
Saya tadi sudah menjadikan fokus. Oke.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity, Pak Henry, Pak Aji. I appreciate the comprehensive presentation. In the paper today, I read that Sri Mulyani said, the Minister of Finance said, all is well, but. So I think it's the same like your tone. Everything is well, but blah, 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 something like that. So there is some condition following the optimistic explanation about the current state of the national economy. So I find it the similar tone with what Ibu Sri Mulyani said in the paper today. So reading the ADO, I can't help reminiscing the 3 years that seems that not so long ago, from 2020, 2021, 2022. So 2020 is the year of survival. It's so hard, the livelihood during that time. 2021 is recovery. And then 2022 is the time where we have to adjust to the next normal. And in between, there are a little bit toxic mix of recession risk to the world economy, like you and Pa Aji explained about the American inflation, and then the European energy crisis, and the China Omicron outbreaks, which threatens the world economy with a downturn. And then the war. That's make us go through an era in which the Economist magazine said very succinctly that welcome to the era of predictable unpredictability. So it's kind of a contradictory term, but it's really, really showing the tone of the day in the years to come, I guess. This is also the things that Pa Henry and Pa Aji mentioned a lot about the rates in the US, the expected Fed rates, and then the inflation. On inflation, I think the problem with inflation is once it is unleashed, it gains momentum. So about a month ago, we're still talking about the inflation rate in US about 6.5, 6.7, 6.8, and then 2 or 3 weeks ago about 7.2, 7.3, 7.8, and yesterday they announced about 8.5. So it's really gained momentum. And most of the advanced economy also have their inflation above above the target of their central bank, as well as the emerging market that cover 50 countries for the emerging countries, and the advanced economy covering around 31 countries. So the inflation is also the talk of the day everywhere. And Ibu Sri Mulyani also pointed another thing that right now the Indonesian economy is not only influenced heavily by the pandemic, but by the geopolitics. So the geopolitics is more influential right now compared to the pandemic, as we already experienced the trade almost 3 years now. But the inflation in Indonesia is quite controlled, is quite manageable. The year-on-year rate 2.6 and the year-to-date is 1.2. So all is well, but like I said, there's always a but following the optimistic explanation. So for the for all of this, like the rates and the inflations, the question is for Indonesia as well as for other countries in the world is how high it will be, how far it will go, and how long will be experienced by any country, including Indonesia. So when we talk about inflation, it should be about how high, how far, and how long. So I just read the paper yesterday from Kompas regarding the impact of Russian-Ukraine crisis to the Indonesian economy. From Litbang Kompas, they use the CGE Indomini 185 models, and they come up with this like in the short term, they will increase inflation such and such, reduce GDP, and also increase export, as well as have a negative impact on job creations, nominal wage, real wage, GDP, household consumption, whilst have a positive impact on the price and investment capital, and then inflation, and also will increase the export. So what does this mean to Indonesian? How the condition like shown in the previous slide and this slide meaning for Indonesia? The transmission to Indonesia, I think, will be flow through several channels like trade channels, as well as financial channels, as well as other things. See the trade channel, for example, we will see a strong commodity export, strong commodity export and higher, and this will in turn followed by the higher government revenue. This higher government revenue also will be channeled to the financial system, and hopefully go through the banking system and then flow through the credit line to the real sectors. But it's also have some possibility to reaching not too high growth. For example, like Henry also mentioned about the coal, for example, there's a problem also some capacity domestically. On the financial side, we see an inflows. We see the stock exchange index almost reaching their high, their record high almost every day, while the Dow Jones experiencing otherwise. So this is probably because of the Russian right now has been excluded on the MSCI index calculation. So that's why investors seek for a new place to play. And on the currency as well, if the Fed is not so hawkish, probably the currency of rupiah will be relatively stable. There is some also on the other front, like the possibility of rising inflation, like Pa Henry and Pa Haji also mentioned on the, but this also some pressure to the state-owned, especially PLN and Pertamina. Right now, we see already that they have to increase the subsidy for fuel. This is also have some pressure to the state budget in the form of BLT as a form of social protection to compensate the rising prices, giving more and more tighter fiscal space to the state budget as we fight to maintain the purchasing power of the society. Another problem is also the program of decarbonize the economy. This will be suffering from the delayed actions. So an actions toward net zero emissions and also reducing emission target will suffer the delayed action because of the current development in the geopolitics. So maybe I jump to the last item. Maybe I would like to probably offer some perspective on the investment. What I mean by investment is the FDI, the foreign direct investment type of investment. As a picture, as a general pictures of the landscape about the prospect of Indonesia as the FDI target, the UNCTAD, the UNCTAD World Investment Report last year put Indonesia in ranking number 17. So it's still quite attractive. Out of 20, still in front of France, Vietnam, and Japan. So in terms of the top destinations, Indonesia is still being considered as attractive destination for the investment. So the figures for investment realization last year reached 900 trillions. And this year, the target is increased up to 1,200 trillion, so even more. So the target seems pretty daunting. To be honest, it's really high, but we still maintain some optimism to reach this target of the FDI. And bear in mind that this figures is excluding the upstream oil and gas and financial sector, and it is only 15 to 16% of the total gross capital formation, the capital I in the national calculation. So last one is about the type of investment coming into Indonesia right now. It is based on the internal survey by the BKPM when talking about what is it right now, the features and the profile of investor coming into Indonesia based on our conversation with them on a daily basis. The most interesting features that I could share to you is that about the risk. Right now, the investor have very low appetite to take risks. So they ask about the clear and clean type of land certificates. So the appetite to take risk is really low because there's a lot of offers and alternative. So for Indonesia, this should be a caution, a warning to improve further the investment climate in order to attract investment to Indonesia. And right now, the investor really prefer the experience rather than other things. So if they find it a bit convenience and they enjoy the process, then they will choose Indonesia as their location. So this is also quite a good input for us to ever improve the investment climate to attract the FDI in the years to come. So Bu Rahma, I should stop there, and then maybe we can continue in the discussion session if you like.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Ibu Rahma.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Indra atas tanggapannya yang sangat insightful terkait outlook ekonomi Indonesia ke depan. Saya mencatat kata kunci yang menarik, predictable unpredictability. Nah, ini menarik sekali. Kemudian juga tadi Pak Indra menggarisbawahi beberapa resiko, termasuk resiko geopolitik dan transmission to Indonesia, serta beberapa perspektif terkait FDI, termasuk bahwa investor ke depan itu cenderung memiliki risk appetite yang rendah. Baik, selanjutnya saya akan mengundang panelis yang kedua, yaitu Ibu Zahra Kemala Nindita Murad. Beliau merupakan Direktur UKM Center, Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Indonesia. Beliau menyelesaikan pendidikan S3-nya di Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Monash University dengan topik mengenai group lending, personal well-being, dan business success among low-income women in Indonesia. Menarik sekali ini disertasinya Bu Zahra. Dan beliau menyelesaikan pendidikan S2-nya di Andrew Young School of Policy Studies di Georgia State University dan S1 di Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis Universitas Indonesia. Bu Zahra silahkan untuk 5-7 menit ke depan memberikan tanggapannya.
Thank you, Bu Rahma. If I may please to share my screen. Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, thank you for a very interesting presentation about the economy in 2022 from the top down from Pak Henry and Pak Aji. For my discussion, I would like to emphasize a specific point in the report where it is mentioned that informality remained high, with 59.4% of the worker is still in the informal sector. So since I'm from UKM Center, which focuses on micro, small and medium enterprises, and they are mainly informal, I would like to discuss a bit more specific on this sector. Basically, to say all the issues that have been discussed in the outlook about the effect of COVID-19 on the economy might be a bit different between the formal sectors and the informal sectors, with the latter tend to be more vulnerable. Also, the micro and small businesses have characteristics of having simple and uncomplicated businesses where they can actually shut down and reopen fairly quickly compared to the big businesses. So their recovery will be a bit different too from the big businesses. In the past 2 years, our UKM Center has conducted surveys and also ongoing discussions with our micro clients. What we found that the main issue for MSME, micro and small medium enterprises in the COVID-19 pandemic era, is the disconnectivity in supply chain due to the containment policy between supplier to the MSME and MSME to the consumer. And when we discuss the main issues with them, they actually separate the issues into 3, which is production, cost, and revenue. In terms of revenue, most of our clients actually facing revenue fall, drop in sales. They also face interrupted logistics and product delivery, and the cash flow is actually dried out. This issue led to another issue in terms of costs. They're unable to pay their loan, salary, raw material purchase, overhead costs, and etc. This one is also leads to the problem in production when they have discontinued raw material, lack of inventory, reduced productivity and capacity, and in the end of the day, some of our respondents has to lay off the workers, and tragically, some of them have to shut down. So if we see some from several other surveys conducted by Bappenas and Compact, World Bank, and also our Crime Center, all of them in 2020, most of them is actually showing pretty similar results, where more than 80% of the MSME face a drop in sales. In Bappenas surveys, it shows that only 60% of respondents was able to stay in business, while in World Bank, in the first round, they've mentioned that 9% of the MSMEs filed for bankruptcy, and their second round of the survey is actually only 3%. It's actually decreasing, that the MSME has to file bankruptcy. For our UMKM Center, we found that from our 500 respondents, 13% of them has to temporarily close a business. And then they said that they're probably going to reopen again once the situation is actually getting better. The interesting part is actually 95% of our respondents actually decided to change their business. So for instance, if before they're actually selling textile or clothing materials and the sales drop, they actually changed the business into food and beverages because they said there's actually more people want to buy that kind of products. And interestingly, actually we have 15% that switched to digital, even though most of the switching to digital is not actually joining some kind of e-commerce, but mostly just joining Facebook, joining Instagram or TikTok, and they actually advertise their product there. Most of the people also try to advertise their product through WhatsApp. So the switching to technology or to digital is actually only up to that point. Now, the government actually provide a lot of support for the MSME sector, which is one of the focus area in the National Economic Recovery Policy, or PEN. There's a stimulus of 123.5 trillion, which is provided through the banking sector, mainly as a deferred cash payment, and is actually targeting the MSME cost side. While for the MSME in the informal sector, the government's actually given 2.4 million cash transfers to help them during the pandemic. Unfortunately, as we know, it's actually typical, there was still some issues in the disbursement process, and not all the 12.8 million targeted SMEs can access this cash support. That is mainly because sometimes it's so difficult for the MSMEs to gather the required documents to apply for these cash transfers, and sometimes the data that the government has for this MSMEs is actually not complete. So we can say that relying on this stimulus might not be enough for the MSME to survive in this pandemic era. Therefore, I'm very much agree with what has been said in the Outlook, that we need to go digital and have technology transformation to face the future economy. In terms of the MSME sector, we can restore the connectivity from the supplier to MSME and MSME to the consumer by having this digital transformation. This can be done by implementing digitalization in the area of marketing, payment, using e-payment, e-wallet, like GoPay, like OVO, financing, business management, logistics, and mainly for the micro businesses, they tend to use the platform like social media, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, TikTok, and also using e-commerce like Shopee, Lazada, Bukalapak, or Tokopedia. It's also interesting, we have actually several banks that really support their MSME clients to becoming more digital. For instance, like Pasar.id by Bank Rakyat Indonesia. So they're actually encouraging their MSMEs to go digital. Let's just say that on top of restoring the connectivity due to the pandemic, micro and small businesses definitely will get a lot of benefit from digitalization, such as reaching wider consumer base. They can also scale up their business and more efficient in the decision making. But similar to the Outlook, which discussed barriers to the technological adoption, based on our survey, we also found that there are still some challenges, especially for the micro and small businesses in adopting new technology. First of all, most of our clients still have the traditional mindset and they prefer to run their business as usual. They still love to be in their comfort zone. While seeing adopting technology is something that is actually very vague and very scary. So this is something that we need to help them to overcome. The second one is the actual lack of digital literacy. For instance, some of our clients face difficulties in opening an email account, even just an email account, or applying to become a seller in e-commerce such as Shopee and Tokopedia. I mean, they're actually just used to WhatsApp, like selling their products on WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, but to actually approach the bigger e-commerce platform is still a challenge for them. The third one is actually outdated gadgets. So even though nowadays we can see that a lot of people already can afford to buy a smartphone, but in our survey, a lot of our micro and small enterprise, some of them are actually still using the old type gadget or mobile phone. So this is also hindering them to actually adopt the new technology and then to use that kind of like platform such as the e-commerce. Number four, unfortunately, our digital ecosystem is also not fully established. And as we know, we still have a quite limited network infrastructure. So this kind of stuff, it's still actually a bit of a challenge for the micro and small business to adopt the new technology. So we can say that micro and small businesses that can adopt technology fairly quickly will be benefiting a lot, while the one that can't will be left behind. So we do know that technology is fastly adopted in areas like Jakarta and probably other big cities and also in Java Island, because they have better access to facilities, they have better infrastructure, and the MSMEs in Jakarta tend to be more technology savvy compared to the MSMEs in other areas that are not so advanced. So this is something that we need to be concerned about, because Indonesia is not only Jakarta or Java, and it's going to affect the inequality if the one is actually adopting to technology faster can actually get better, and the ones that get left behind is going to be definitely left. So again, I think is it really important for us to encourage the micro and small businesses to adopt the new technology, considering the MSME contribution to the economy or to the GDP. It might be worth considering if there is a synergy among the stakeholders from the academics, the business sectors, the government, the community. Like for the business sectors, well, they provide the marketplace, the virtual festive, the partnership, and then the government, they should provide the regulation, the law and incentives needed to actually attract these people, these businesses, to actually adopt technology faster, and also definitely to provide a good digital infrastructure. And we also need the community to actually disseminate the information, to actually provide networking and social movement. When we talk to our clients in our survey, we know that actually a lot of government institutions or even like business sectors already have many programs targeted directly for MSMEs. But in the field, we found that a lot of our members or clients find it difficult to access or getting information about this kind of stuff, digitalization. So I think it is also very important to find like a more appropriate technology that will best suit this kind of like micro and small businesses that can help them to scale up their business. And this kind of stuff is also can be done by academics, by having some research, giving the MSMEs training, coaching, and mentoring, which also can be done from the business sector. And also for the government is also to give that kind of like infrastructure, then the digital ecosystem that will going to make sure that these small and micro and medium enterprises can adopt technology even faster. not just in Jakarta and Java Island, but also for the rest of Indonesia. So I think that is all from me. Again, thank you for the quite positive outlook and the prospect for Indonesian economy in 2022 and 2023, which hopefully soon we can achieve it. Thank you, and back to you, Bu Rahma.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Zahra atas paparannya yang sangat menarik. Beberapa hal yang bisa saya catat bahwa memang UMKM ini terdampak besar ketika terjadi pandemi COVID-19, tetapi mayoritas juga ingin stay in business. Kemudian juga pentingnya digital transformation, namun challenges-nya cukup banyak, mulai dari mindset, literasi, kemudian gadget, digital ecosystem, dan juga limited network infrastructure. Oke, dari pembahasan mengenai UMKM, sekarang kita akan berlanjut ke tanggapan dari panelis yang terakhir, Bapak Muhammad Dian Revindo. Beliau merupakan Kepala Pusat Kajian, Iklim Bisnis, dan Global Value Chain, Lembaga LPM FEB UI, kemudian juga dosen di Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis UI. Beliau menyelesaikan pendidikan PhD di Economics dari Lincoln University New Zealand, studi master di European Studies, dan Economics dari KU Leuven, Belgium, dan tentunya S1 dari FEUI. Silakan Pak Revindo, untuk 5-7 menit ke depan ya Pak ya.
Yeah, thank you Bu Rahma, thank you Pak Henry and Pak Aji for preparing the report. I read the report with interest, with great interest. Unfortunately, I'm not a macroeconomist by training. I'm not a macroeconomic expert. So I read the report from the perspective of a researcher who has been doing some research and in several sectors in Indonesia for the last several years. So yeah, I will go directly into some comments. So again, I will put myself as a researcher reading the report. First, I would like to appreciate the tone of the report. So the report is very critical. It highlights several warnings to be addressed by Indonesia in order to reach the expected growth. However, the tone is positive, right, and optimistic. So critical notes but positive tone. I think it's very important. Why? Because personally, I believe that economic growth may come from at least two sources. The first one is the economic fundamental variables. And the second one, economic growth may also come from positive sentiment or expectation of the economic agents, which will lead them to confidently spend or invest, which lead to actual growth. So this is very important for me. And then, in the report, I found some numbers regarding the economic growth. I agree that in Indonesia was on its trajectory of full recovery, but was disrupted by the surging Delta variant case in the third quarter, which put the yearly growth in a modest figure of 3.7%. So having said that, what have we learned for the remaining of the 2022 and upcoming 2023? So the key issues, to my view, is we have to allow full mobility relaxation, but keep the health protocol and standard high. And then another thing I learned from the last couple of years, that we need better government public communication, because I believe a good public policy is a public policy which is good communicated or well communicated. For example, some policies are, to me, the policies make sense, but if they are not clearly explained to the public, then the response of the public will be very different. And also, there has been rapid digitalization in the last couple of years, thanks to blessing in disguise from the pandemic. But we need to have inclusive digitalization. Right. I will touch upon the inflation a little bit because it's stated in the report. The main theme and challenge for Indonesian economy in 2022 and 2023, I believe, will be how to manage the inflation, because we know that it's driven by Ramadan period, and then there will be very soon relaxation of social restriction, rising energy and food prices due to the global geopolitical tension. which put policymakers, especially the Indonesian Central Bank, in a tough position. And then I will also touch upon some part of the report regarding the fiscal ability or fiscal capacity. The current development will put some pressure on fiscal posture, considering the rising price level, while Indonesia still have to maintain the need to allocate subsidies for the poor and the vulnerable. So I think it will be quite a pressure, quite a challenge for Indonesia. And then also the government is, already mandate to lower deficit budget below 3% in 2023, which further limit the fiscal space while it's already tight now in the 2022. So the government revenue may still raise from tax reforms. We know that there is a increasing value-added tax and expected higher growth in 2022-2023 that LPM predicted in between will range between 4.9 to 5.1. But need to be alert to higher subsidy for electricity and energy and weak consumption. Why we have to be aware of the weak consumption? The report also noted that consumption is still a significant driver for growth, contributing around a third of GDP growth, roughly equivalent to investment and net export contribution. However, that we have to be aware that the accelerating inflation due to external factors like increase in food and oil price and the Russian invasion, and also from internal, from the VAT reform. Those factors may limit the total consumption. Okay, now let's move to external side. Merchandise export recorded 42% growth in 2021, all-time high. This quite a performance, right? It's due to high demand of commodities such as coal, palm oil, and nickel. However, in this year, 2022, the export may grow slower due to increase in global oil price. And robust performance of trade balance and current account balance has helped to maintain relatively stable net capital flows and rupiah throughout 2021. We hope that this will be still stable in 2022. Pak Indra knows it better than I do. And then investment realization shows a promising sign, right? Pak Indra already highlighted this in 2021. However, this year and next year, the investment in high value-added industries, which takes a quite medium or long-term return, the investor may watch closely what happened with the certainty of the 2024 general election agenda, right? They want to make sure that there is no changing regulation and incentive beyond 2024. They just want to ensure that. And also in terms of trade and investment, the quite big issue in Indonesia is how inclusive is this trade and GVC. What I mean by inclusive is that yes, trade create prosperity, create welfare, create growth. Also GVC spread the economic activity across countries, yes. But how much local, medium and small, micro, small and medium enterprise enjoy as a supplier? How the multinational enterprise source their inputs from local suppliers? I believe the government already put some regulatory for partnership, right? But we need to see how it is implemented, because some surveys, some studies show that what happens is that those multinational companies are establishing the small enterprise to supply themselves rather than enabling or empowering the local MSMEs. That's the first note on inequality. The second issue of inclusivity of these GVC is that how to make it friendly for low educated labor force, and also for disabled or for female workforce. And the other issue of inclusivity is how it is also spread across the region within Indonesia rather than concentrated in Java, because the government already have the special economic zone policy, but we will see whether those investors are willing to invest in Kalimantan, in Sumatra, so it spread the economic value added. Moving on, more specific on sectoral growth, the ICT sector and automotive sales has led the economic growth. We need to carefully calculate the fiscal and non-fiscal incentive, because as we are aware of, there's prolonging tax incentive for automotive, for example, right? So it has to be carefully calculated. If it's already reached the natural growth of sales, maybe we can relax the incentive a little bit. And then the tourism recovery, Pak Henry already highlighted the issue. There is now quite a debate whether we want quite quick recovery, which means that in the next couple of months we welcome everyone, right? In January and February alone, there were more than 30,000 tourists, international tourists coming to Indonesia, which is quite low. In 2021, the number of tourists was 1.6 million, just 1/10 of the number in 2019 prior to the pandemic, right? So now, while we have the relaxation in mobility, then we have to pose the question: do we have high-quality tourists? Because the tourist spending in Indonesia, the international tourist spending is only 1,200,000. It's very low. They have social impact. They create ecological footprint. So we consider: do we need them, or do we need a high-quality tourists? But at the same time, while we want a quick recovery, we are tempted to have, okay, let everyone come first, and then at the end of this year, we can try to select what kind of tourists we want to come. And the last one I want to touch upon, because it's a specific issue in the report, is digitalization, already mentioned also by Ibu Zahra. So the digitalization should be well managed. Because why? Because it creates opportunity on the one hand, but on the other hand, it may create new inequality and growth disparity across part of the society and across region in Indonesia. For example, as far as I know, last year there's still almost 1,000 villages in Indonesia which no internet connection, and almost 20,000 villages in Indonesia, they have internet connection, but very low quality, right? So if we push the digitalization while the infrastructure is still imbalanced, then we create new inequality. So this should be top of our agenda. And then apart from infrastructure is the literacy, because there's some study showing that in some regencies which have better internet connection, there is a higher poverty rate. Why? Because stronger internet connection means more spending on data, but it doesn't translate into productive economic activity. So literacy should follow after infrastructure and equipment, right? And also security issue, because some small and medium enterprise owners, for example, they are not sure whether they would like to embrace the digital transaction because they are not sure about the security of their data. And lastly, again, echoing Ibu Zahra already said, we need appropriate digitalization for various firm types and sizes. The digitalization should not only refer to e-commerce platform for marketing, but it's end-to-end digitalization, ranging from downloading all application needed to predict, to forecast the weather, or to manage the payroll, anything related from production into marketing. Should be provided that's appropriate for different SMEs in different industries, different types and different sizes. I think I will stop there to give more time for discussion. Ibu Rahma, over to you.
Baik, terima kasih banyak Pak Revindo atas tanggapannya dan juga beberapa critical notes, termasuk terkait dengan komunikasi kebijakan publik pemerintah yang harus lebih baik dan juga inclusive digitalization. Nah, selanjutnya saya akan berikan kesempatan kepada para peserta untuk memberikan pertanyaan, dan alhamdulillah kita sudah ada satu penanya yang nanti saya minta dijawab oleh Pak Henry dan Pak Indra, karena ini terkait dengan Pak Henry dan Pak Indra. Pertanyaannya dari Rahmat Tri Swasono. Izin bertanya, bagaimana strategi pemerintah dalam menyehatkan APBN pasca krisis pandemi? Di sisi lain, kondisi perekonomian belum sepenuhnya pulih. Silakan Pak Henry.
Terima kasih, Ibu. Thank you, Pak Rahmat, for that question regarding fiscal consolidation. As you may have read in the news, the government plans to go back to 3% to a deficit of 3% of GDP in 2023. Now, I would like to answer this question by drawing on the insights delivered by our colleagues in the panel. Pa Indra has noted that inflation is a big concern. And in fact, Agustin Carstens, the head of the Bank for International Settlements, 2 weeks ago noted that the era of low inflation may be over and that we may now be heading to another era of high inflation. As Pa Revindo has noted, in this environment, it will be critical to help vulnerable households cope with the shock of commodity price shocks. So how can we both achieve fiscal consolidation and at the same time protect the vulnerable from the commodity price shocks? And here I draw from Ibu Zahra's insights about the agility of MSMEs, about how quickly they've been able to cope, both with business models and with how to communicate with the public. I think the key there is for agility with fiscal policy is twofold. One, it's important to go back to the fiscal framework because it has served Indonesia well by lending credibility to macroeconomic policy. But at the same time, as Pa Revindo has noted, it's important to protect the vulnerable. How do we achieve both? Through carefully targeted transfers, so that given the scarce resources, we are still able to provide social assistance. In this regard, it's interesting and it's very positive that the government has recently decided to provide cash transfers to 23 million recipients in order to help them cope with the higher prices of cooking oil. It's a very good initiative because it minimizes the impact on the product markets, but at the same time ensures that people are indeed helped. Thank you very much.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak Henry atas jawabannya yang singkat dan padat mengenai fiscal consolidation. Selanjutnya saya minta tanggapan dari Pak Indra dan nanti selanjutnya penutup dari Pak Revindo dan Ibu Zahra.
Thank you, Brahma. Yeah, what is the priority of the government amid the current situations? I think it will centered into two things. First is how to protect vulnerables. That is one of top priority. If we look at the current situation that leads to the higher prices, so it have to be compensated with some social protection. That's the first one. The second one is how to maintain the purchasing power. So these are the two top priority, I guess, at least for the next 3 months. So why 3 months? Because it's right now it's so difficult to see beyond beyond 3 months. Changes and shocks and disruptions happens almost on a daily basis right now. So we have to adjust to that new normal. So yes, I guess protect for the vulnerable and the maintain purchasing power is the two top priorities currently. Thank you.
Baik, terima kasih banyak Pak Indra tanggapannya. Selanjutnya saya undang Ibu Zahra untuk memberikan concluding statement.
Thank you, Bu Rahma. Basically for me, I mean, I think I agree with what Pak Indra just said about like protecting the vulnerable and actually maintaining the purchasing power of the people. Because again, we're actually in Ramadan and we're actually going to near for the Idul Fitri. So I think it's actually very important to make sure that people are in a stable condition and everything is taken care of in terms of their welfare. And looking at the Indonesian Outlook from the ADB, I think it's actually fair to say that it's actually very good to see that something is quite positive, because if we start the year by saying that something is going to be negative, then it's not going to be good, it's going to go downhill. But I'm actually pretty much positive looking at this outlook, and I think the numbers that given is actually quite achievable. So that's why I think it's good for us to be hopeful in this year. Thank you.
Oke. Terima kasih Bu Zahra. Terakhir saya mohon tanggapan concluding statement dari Pak Revindo.
Yes, thank you, Bu Rahma. So, how to manage the fiscal? I'm not a macroeconomist by training, but from some studies conducted during the pandemic, we learned something that the government should encourage the rich to spend, and the spending will create value-added tax and other tax. But of course, that kind of policy should be well communicated to the public. For example, we know that 2022 and 2021, the government relaxed the luxury tax for cars, right, for automotive, right? There is a quite strong calculation behind that. That we estimate that okay, the government will lose luxury tax revenue on the one hand, but they will receive VAT and corporate tax. Because of the growing upstream industries supporting automotives and also downstream industries in automotive. So this should be a good, very detailed calculation. However, it should be well communicated to the public. Otherwise, the public will think that the government keep serving the rich. No, it's not that way. I understand. Of course, I understand it, but the government want the rich to spend. Also, the deduction of property tax, for example, it has to be well communicated to the public. Tell the public that, look, our Ministry of Finance said that there is during the pandemic, the saving of the rich people tend to have higher account from time to time, right? Higher accumulation of saving account. They have to be spent one way or another in Indonesia. And what kind of spending they like? Automotive and houses, right? And it will create income from government in other side, in VAT, in corporate tax and others. That's just one example. So more current issue, for example, is the fuel price, right? Of course, we understand that one way or another, the RON 92 should increase, the price should increase, but it has to be calculated. How much difference should be the price between RON 92 and RON 90? Because our survey with Indonesia Consumer Foundation in 2022 showed that if the difference in price is more than 1,000 rupiahs, and then there will be a migration from RON 92 to RON 90, and it will increase the burden of subsidy. Right, so that kind of we have to be willing to put all the data in the table and go into the details, and then find the best solution and also the best way to communicate with the public. Thank you, Bram.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Revindo. Terakhir saya mohon concluding statement dari Pak Henry. Silakan Pak Henry.
Thank you very much, Ibu, for your expert moderation. And thank you very much for our co-panelists, Pa Aji, Pa Revindo, Ibu Zara, and Pa Indra for your insights. Thank you also again to Dean Tegu for co-hosting this event. For my closing remarks, I understand that there are a lot of students from Universitas Indonesia in the audience, and I also used to teach undergraduates, and so I would like to address this to them. We're very happy that you're attending. I would just like to note that when I was your age, there was an economic crisis in the Philippines, and this too shall pass, as they say. And in the case of Indonesia, the economy has been very resilient, after only -2 decline, solid recovery last year. Now, with regard to, in relation to that, a crisis can lead to a lot of confusion, and as Pa Indras noted, every day there is a shock. But that also means that it offers a lot of opportunities for you students to learn economics even more. That if something is always happening, then I hope that you will turn to your professors and to your textbooks to help understand what's going on in the Indonesian economy, so that one day you too, like Pa Indra, Ibu Zara, and Ibu Ramatina, and everyone else can contribute to the economy's growth and development. Thank you.
Terima kasih banyak Pak Henry atas concluding statement-nya yang luar biasa. Saya berharap ini didengarkan oleh semua mahasiswa yang hadir ya pada webinar pada sore hari ini. Saya pun dulu masuk FEUI ketika krisis ekonomi 98, Pak Henry. Dan saya juga merasakan banyak sekali lesson learned yang bisa didapatkan dari krisis. Baik Ibu Bapak, para narasumber, para panelis, Bapak Dekan, dan juga para peserta webinar, khususnya mahasiswa yang berbahagia, tidak terasa kita sudah sampai di penghujung acara. Banyak sekali yang bisa kita dapatkan dari sesi pemaparan Indonesia Economic Outlook 2022-2023 dan juga diskusi pada sore hari ini, yang tentunya tidak bisa saya simpulkan satu persatu. Namun demikian, satu hal yang saya optimis, bahwa this too shall pass, bahwa insya Allah Indonesia akan recover together, recover stronger, bersama dengan negara lainnya di dunia. Terima kasih banyak atas perhatiannya. Mohon maaf jika ada kekurangan. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you Pak Henry, Pak Aji.
Pak Henry, Pak Aji.
Terima kasih.
Pak Indra, sampai ketemu lagi Pak Indra.
Sampai ketemu.
Terima kasih Bapak Ibu
Henry.
semua. Terima kasih banyak.
Bapak-bapak
Adik-adik
dan
mahasiswa.
Brahma.
Terima kasih Bapak semuanya.
Terima kasih.
Sehat-sehat selalu.
Yap.
Sampai ketemu lagi.
Insya Allah.
Terima kasih semuanya Bapak Ibu.